Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming this evening. We're so glad to have you all here. So I am Danielle Castellaro, Supervisor of Adult Special Services with the Northern Region Ed Services Commission. I recognize a bunch of our faces, and we have a bunch of new faces too, so thank you so much for being here. So I'm so excited to introduce our speaker, Lisa McCauley-Parles. So Lisa is a partner in the Clark, New Jersey law firm Parles Reckham, LLP, and the parent of a 33-year-old son with autism. Her practice focuses on representing individuals with disabilities, their families in the areas of early intervention, special education, transition and adult services, residential placements, reasonable accommodations, insurance coverage, and guardianships. In addition to representing individuals with disabilities and their families, she has also represented numerous nonprofit organizations in the disabilities community. She serves on the Board of Trustees of Circle Haven, Inc., a nonprofit organization that addresses the needs of adults with developmental disabilities and is currently in the process of developing a unique residential project in South Jersey. She's a frequent lecturer and has appeared in numerous television and radio broadcasts, including Nightline and ABC World News Tonight. She has participated as a panelist and moderator for numerous continuing legal education seminars and has published a number of articles in peer-reviewed journals and Bar Association publications. Lisa is a founding member of the National Council on Severe Autism, a nonprofit organization that advocates for recognition, policies, and solutions to address the needs of the growing population of individuals, families, and caregivers affected by severe forms of autism and related disorders. She has played a central role in national advocacy efforts in Washington, D.C., particularly in the area of housing. Lisa was a speaker at the United Nations for World Autism Day in 2017 and was invited as an expert on the United States General Accountability Office panel in Washington, D.C. entitled Youth with Autism, Transitioning to Adulthood in 2016. She has also been an invited speaker before the New Jersey State Senate Legislative Oversight Committee, as well as the New Jersey State Assembly Human Resources Committee. She tirelessly advocated for changes to the New Jersey State's statewide transition plan and federal regulations in order to ensure that a full array of services and choices are available to the developmentally disabled. Lisa has served as the Director of Leadership Studies program at Seton Hall University, Stillman School of Business, and an adjunct professor in both the undergraduate and MBA programs, where she received the Adjunct Professor Excellence Award. She has also been...
we're definitely cutting her off.
Well, as you can see, we are so excited. She brings a wealth of knowledge to us, and Lisa, I'll take it away.
The very first part of the introduction, of course, I'm the mom of Andrew, who is turning 34 and just ran into a mom that we first connected, what we said, 19 years ago. So been at it a long time. Andrew has severe autism and complex medical needs. That's what really got me involved in the National Council of Severe Autism, which is, if you're not familiar with that organization, I would definitely urge you to take a look at them. They're doing some really, really great stuff. And there are some state chapters, and New Jersey just actually started their state chapter. So it's National Councils for Severe Autism. Okay, so let me ask this. First of all, what time do we have to be done?
8:30?
Okay, so then if I'm still talking by 10 after, stop me.
Okay.
So we can make sure, I like Q&A, We'll try to hold it for the, to the end if it's a complex question, but it's okay if we sprinkle in between. Let me just first ask, how many people are parents of a loved one that has a developmental disability? Okay, and how many people are professionals in the field? Okay, how many are both? Right? So a lot of us find our way to this area, because I do feel that the most defining thing about me is the fact that I'm Andrew's mom. It affects everything that you do, all the decisions you make, and what you really start to feel passionate about, and some days really angry about too. So we'll share a little bit of that too. So I'm going to talk today about adult services. How many people's children are actually currently being served by DDD or a DDD funded project? Okay, all right. So just a handful. So everyone else is under 21? Okay, oh, very proactive group, so that's good. No, the worst calls are the calls from the sibling when the second parent passes, and believe it or not, we still get that, where people are just literally not even in the system. I had a couple of them this month, so we all want to avoid that. Not only getting people in the system, getting them fully funded, and in the best case scenarios, if appropriate, in residential before the parent passes, because that transition is very difficult. I know my son is in residential, and that if the parents are there, it's so much better, not only in terms of the person with the disabilities not dealing with loss and change and grief and all at the same time, but the parents are vital parts of programs running really well. She mentioned the housing project we're working on. I don't think we have a slide in there. It's called Circle Haven, which actually has a farm component. It's going to be right next to Rowan University, which is way, way south, almost outside of Philly. You know that?
When it was Glassboro.
Okay, yeah. So we actually just opened our enrichment center, but in about 2 years, the actual building will be finished. We're really excited about that. And I think that the hallmark of that, which was founded by a group of parents that started working on it, I think 8.5 years ago, was that we wanted an organization that recognizes that it is so many important pieces, but parents are really have to play a vital role in an organization. Okay, yes.
Is that a group home or is it?
It's going to be a campus actually. So it will be for 22 individuals, combination of 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, variety of disabilities. So we're hoping it will be a model that we will be able to replicate. So, okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the time to fix the roof is when the sun is shining. Someone actually just told me that John F. Kennedy used that in his inauguration speech. So he probably stole it from someone, and now I'm stealing it from him. So sort of the point that I was making, right? Like, if the earlier we can plan, generally the better things go, although it's not always possible to do all of it. So I want to just talk about sort of like the key things we want to start thinking about. So the transition not only to adult, but when you're in adult, that the person's getting as much a robust program as they possibly can. But I will say that sometimes the sun feels like it's never shining, right? So we don't always have the kind of pauses that parents of typical kids have. So sometimes we just have to look for, I guess, those drizzly days, right? And get out there and find time. So some of the key points is that under the federal idea, so the education law, there is a requirement that school district look at transition. So at 14, they're supposed to start planning and evaluating, and by 16, you should actually have a transition plan in your IEP. That is probably one of the most common things when I come in after our practice does school district cases, but a lot of times people will first come to me as an adult, and I'll read an IEP and just think this is crazy. The transition plan is a parent will contact DDD, right? That can't be a transition plan. We want so the earlier we start thinking about it, and it's very hard to do it because parents, for us, it's hard to fast forward because fast forward is scary, right? And when you really fast forward, then it really, really gets scary. So, but I do always want to share that with parents is that think about the longer term, and if eventually your loved one might be in a residential program, what are some of the most important things that they would need to do, not only to make them more independent, and not all of them can be independent. My son requires significant help through almost every aspect of his life, but the less that he is in need of someone doing something for him, even just things like leisure skills. Like sometimes I don't even see that in an IEP, that anyone is bothered to teach somebody something that would keep them occupied for, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe we get to 20 eventually. So just want to point that out. That is something, that's a whole nother lecture. If you go on our firm's website, we actually have one that was recently recorded on transition assessments and goals. Guardianship, I'm going to talk in a little more detail about that. We also do want to think about that before the 18th birthday, because sometimes having a IEP that reflects that the person does have needs is also helpful to the guardianship, but you actually can't file until 60 days before the 18th birthday. There's a little bit of gap in the law because we've had cases where people have turned 18 and the guardianship's not finished yet. But you file before then, but think about it beforehand. Trust and estates planning, I say ASAP. We all should think of that. Whether you have a disabled loved one or not, right? Everyone should have a plan. You should have a power of attorney, so in case you can't speak for yourself, someone else can get to the bank, a healthcare proxy, an advanced care director, so everybody needs that. But for our population, it is absolutely critical because we have to protect their benefits. That, I would say, is probably one area that people are most reluctant to look at because it makes it look at things that are super scary. I will tell you I won't tell you because it will be too embarrassing, but how old my son was before I had the special needs trust will be just evidence of how difficult it can be. Medicaid eligibility, that you apply for at 18. I'm gonna go a little bit into that. And then the DDD process. Now, you can apply at 18, but you cannot actually access services until your 21st birthday. And if you're turning 21 in your last year of educational entitlement and you're getting just a day program budget, then obviously you're not gonna access the DDD services until you graduate. So you might turn in January, turn 21, but you still have a little, a half a year left of school. Now, we tell people, don't apply at 18, okay? Because in some circumstances, we will be actually asking for more than just a day program, and if you're that far ahead, they're gonna make you redo that NJCAT anyway, and I wanna know what the circumstances are. Now, I will tell you, this year in particular, particularly in the northern region, boy, it's just been terrible this year in terms of how long it takes to get an application through and to get the NJCAT scored. So I usually would have people start about maybe 8 months before their 21st birthday. I'm now moving that to 12 months. So, but I wouldn't go running and doing it at 18 because that whole assessment process is really important. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so some of the programs that we'll just, should keep in mind, SSI, which that's essentially the monthly check that you get from the Social Security Administration. Most individuals with developmental disabilities are gonna qualify for that. And when you get SSI, Medicaid will automatically come along. I'm gonna talk about what's the importance of Medicaid. Now, some people are actually at SSDI, but they come through a different route. And this gets very confusing because lots of times parents will apply and they get a rejection letter, but they're actually getting a rejection letter for SSDI. They're still just waiting for the answer on SSI. The difference is that SSDI is for people that have a work history and then something happened. So you'll be getting it, it's like a disability clock, so you or I could get it if we became disabled. Also, an individual that has a developmental disability, if they're on SSI, or there's a life event within the parent, so the parent passes away, the parent retires, or the parent begins getting SSDI themselves, then your monthly SSI amount goes up, and you now would be getting an SSDI check. I'm going to mention a resource to you. One of the best resources, free resources, the state ARC, the ARC of New Jersey. They have a great resource team. They also do awesome webinars in terms of just walking you through these steps, but you can literally call with a problem. Like, I just applied and now they're saying I need this, how do I get that to them? Just a really terrific resource. As I said, Medicaid will come along when you qualify for SSI. Now, some people, SSI is also sometimes a long process. So sometimes if I get like an older person that's not in the system, I may go to Medicaid a different route through the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare. You won't get the monthly check, but you'll get that Medicaid number, which we need for DDD. Medicare. So at some point, our loved ones will move on to Medicare. Medicare becomes the primary, Medicaid becomes the secondary insurer. Just want to mention that we do have a number of housing programs. Probably the one most commonly used for our population are the housing vouchers. and they attach to the individual, not to the project. So the HUD ones are more like, this is a HUD apartment, and you get on a wait list for it, as opposed to where you get into an apartment and then you can apply for a housing voucher. Obviously, we're going to talk about DDD and then DVR. Now, DVR, there are some DDD funded projects that are getting joint certification, so that is a funding source for them. But traditionally, DVR is smaller budget, more short-lived, really was devised for people that have a disability but just need a little help, so maybe, some job coaching, but you're gonna fade the job coach. I often see school districts direct parents there instead of DDD. I'm usually not interested in DVR with most of my clients, but I will say there are some projects, for instance, in South Orange, Jespy House is, they've been around for probably 40 years. They actually are jointly funded, so some of their projects are, be funded by both. Okay, next slide. I know that's a lot of information, so, but just so, this is sort of like a little bit of the introduction to alphabet soup, and now we're gonna dive into only some of those bullet points, okay? Okay, when to apply for guardianship. So as I said, but you can't apply until 60 days before, but there's things that you need to do. You actually apply in the county where you and your child lives. And it's in surrogates court, but it's just another, part of state court. And that you can make applications for guardianship anytime. Sometimes for elderly people, we'll do a conservatorship or a guardianship. But for our population, we think about it because in New Jersey, when your child turns 18, they are automatically deemed competent for everything, which means they could get a credit card, they could buy a car, they could do a mortgage for someone else. I had to unwind one of those once. One situation where someone was being convinced to donate their kidney. So we have to just realize, even if your child is nonverbal and has a unmeasurable IQ, the law assumes that. Now, sometimes districts will let parents know this. It actually is a notice page. You probably haven't seen it. It's the last page in your IEP that tells you about this. But it is something that you want to talk about because you're going to be able to continue to make decisions. Next slide, please. So again, they're presumed, competent, and there's several different areas. Now, I will tell you that it's interesting you mentioned the UN, because at the United Nations, one of the things that I talked about was guardianship, and guardianship is, I'm not going to say is controversial, but is one of those hot topics where we have a split field on it. Now, in my view of it, and I'm being recorded, okay, so I'm absolutely saying I am just a strong proponent for looking very closely at whether guardianship makes sense. A lot of people are talking about, supported decision making is so much better. You just the person designates themselves. Well, when I did my presentation at the UN, I talked about my son and his journey, nonverbal, severe self-injury, complex medical needs. When he needed surgery, the surgeon was not going to accept Cheeto on his iPad as consent for the surgery, right? But yet, though all the speakers were talking about, there's all these other, options for it. But the good part about New Jersey is that we have, when you go to a guardianship court, we have full, plenary or full, so you would be of the person, so you're gonna decide, can the person get surgery, where they're gonna live, and of the property, which is their finances, but we do have limited guardianship. So I have had guardianships where we have carved out areas where the person still maintains decision making. And just because somebody is in need of a guardian and you become a guardian, it doesn't mean you're taking choice away. It's still, the guardian is still expected to offer options and choices, and also for those individuals that can participate in the decision making, better that they are, because if you don't get the buy-in from the person served, it's not gonna work, right? And the other piece of it, I think guardianship gets a bad rap because there are different mechanisms in other states. New Jersey is actually really one of the good ones because there's a court-appointed attorney that's actually appointed for the person that you're asking for guardianship, that looks at, does this person need guardianship? What type of guardianship? In what areas? And are the people that have asked to be the guardians appropriate choices? When it's the families, that usually takes them 5 seconds on the choice issue. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so DDD. So just a handful of people are in DDD, right? So how many people are getting anything from CSOC or Perform Care now? See, there's our statistic right there. So 8, 9 years ago, everybody used to be DDD, and then they switched under 21 over to Perform Care. I will say this also for the camera. It was the worst decision New Jersey ever made, is taking our population out of DDD that understood that this was a lifelong disability and moved it into Perform Care. There are many organizations that are working really, really hard to try to bring them along so they understand that this is lifelong. This is forever. This is just a pop in and stabilize and get out. So now, unfortunately, we don't get to DDD. And, you know, I was one of the original appointees to the Family Advisory Council for DDD, which every month we would get together and just eat them alive at each meeting. And it's come a long way, and I say there's something wrong with the system when I'm giving DDD as an example of excellence, okay? But that's how bad Perform Care has really become. And there are, particularly the statewide council is really looking really closely and hard at that. So your family statewide councils are another point for you to get some assistance. So, but when you're 21, right, you can apply at 18, don't do it then, but don't wait too long, so around 20. But at 21, you can start getting services, and it's a variety. Case management, but not really, because that's only for cases where you have significant needs and you're gonna be asking for the larger community care budget, which I'm gonna talk about in a minute, because now we have support coordination. So years ago, it used to be there were actual case managers in DDD, but then they moved to a different model, so now you have support coordination agencies. So you don't get much case management in DDD. Obviously residential, adult day, vocational, family supports, individual supports, and professional support services. So pretty much everything, and then not even listed there, but you can also use your budget for goods and services. And I saw we have a couple goods and services providers here. That is growing. That has really, DDD's done a really good job at, you know, educating whys, like why they should take the goods and services voucher way to get paid. Next slide, please. Okay, so for the basics, it is a functional criteria. I've had people who have been told things like, you know, my child has 110 IQ, 120, I had a couple 140s, okay, and that we're told they're not eligible. IQ is not a determining factor. Now, if you have a 70 or below, that's really, really strong evidence that this person is developmentally disabled, because that's considered cognitively impaired. But I've had people as high as 140 IQs with a college degree, but they were not going to be able to live on their own. They still needed some supports. It is a Medicaid-based service, so as you get Medicaid that you apply to Social Security Administration. It's why there's so many other pieces of tonight's talk that I'm going to come back to about protecting eligibility, because New Jersey funds all of their adult services through Medicaid. So if you don't have a Medicaid number on the first page of your DD application, you're not going to get DDD, okay? You can apply if you're in the process and write pending, but hopefully we've done it before then, but if not, you can. So the waiver. This is an area of great confusion. And part of the reason is that they keep changing the names, right? So let's talk about, as of today's date, what are the names, okay? So we have a comprehensive waiver in New Jersey that funds our adult services. So we have one big waiver. Within the waiver, we have two different programs. Anyone that enters DDD is going to get the supports program, okay? The best way to think about that is like a day budget, okay? It doesn't mean you can only go to a day program. That is another really good change. We went to fee for service. When we did it, providers were pulling their hairs out. We were all losing our minds. It changed the way people got paid, but it did add a lot more choice. So your support budget could be used for all sorts of things. You could go to a program for one day and you could have a direct support professional support you in the community. You can use it to buy a Y membership. There's a lot of flexibility on it, but it's a smaller budget. So it could range between, say, 18 and about 80,000 a year, okay, depending on, you know, what your service needs are. The CCP, that is the big Megillah, as they say, right? The community care program. That's the larger budget. That, in the old days, was used to purchase and pay for the cost of to go live in a group home, right? Again, we don't have that anymore as mandatory. So someone could have that larger community care program budget. It doesn't mean, well, first of all, I have to tell parents, like, a lot of times, I will look at this a year before graduation, and if someone has significant needs, behavioral or medical, or the family circumstance also warrants looking at it, that I will have parents say to me, I don't want to do that, I don't want my child to go anywhere yet, we're not ready for that. I tell them, I promise you no one is coming and picking your child up. And in fact, if I'm standing on your front porch and screaming along with you, they're still not coming and picking them up. Okay, so don't worry about it. No one is going anywhere without your consent. And in circumstances where we really do want that right away, it still takes sometimes a long time. Okay, so where the confusion is that sometimes people are told, like, oh, I'm on the waiver. So they think, oh yeah, I'm on the waiver. Because in the old days, we used to call the CCP the waiver. So that's what, you know, oh, you're on the waiver. Oh yeah, we're on the waiver. They told me on the waiver. Everyone's on a waiver. That's not the magic language. The magic language is CCP. That's what we're all, over time, looking to get, because that's going to be a larger budget. That adds anywhere between another $60,000 to another $450,000 a year to your budget. Okay, is massive, the difference. Now, obviously, I will tell you that I know this myself, because I've had people say to me, and when I do the NJCAT with parents and they end up with getting an EA, so other parent will say to them, or even professionals will say, oh, you're so lucky. And my answer back is that I would gladly give you both my hands and my feet to turn his EA in, right? But we are blessed in that we are in a state that was a big change. Again, providers hated that too, because everybody used to get like this around the same number. And then when they changed that and it became a wider thing, there were some winners and losers, and there was no doubt. And providers had to figure out how they were going to do it. When all of a sudden, where they used to get 180, now they're only getting, 80. But the people that used to get 180, and they had to figure out, well, where am I getting a nurse? How are we paying for a behavior analyst? How am I getting the 2-on-1 that we need to safely get them out to the doctors, right? So that CCP thing we do look at the time of before they graduate. Support coordination, I say we had a number of them. Actually, whoever organized this, you had like my 3 favorite support coordination here, so great job. And don't say that about everyone, but if you are looking for support, the 3 they had here actually are really excellent. So you then get assigned this budget, and we'll say you purchase services, meaning that you can use it for a variety of ways. Provider managed versus self-directed. Has anyone ever heard the term self-directed? Okay, yeah, I feel sorry for you. Okay, so yes, it was a change, and I think choices are always good. So I'll tell you a little bit of my story. My son was in he went to, always had autism, always significant needs, but was a cupcake, okay? Then at 19, stopped eating, stopped sleeping. Longest was 5 days no food, 3 days no sleep. Lost language, had just a neurological breakdown is the only way to describe it, and ended up going to residential at 19 and a half. And we've done a whole different series of things. He was in a licensed provider that we were actually happy with, but my dream always was this campus, and one of our Circle Haven board members is actually, the parents are farmers. I don't know, any cheese fanatics? Bobolink, if you've ever heard of Bobolink. Very famous. Anthony Bourdain did like a whole show on them. They're up in Milford, which is like right on the New Jersey, Pennsylvania. So we have a farming component. So that's always been, my hope and my goal, that he would be in that. Goes and would go out, you have access to the community, but I think there's a lot of arguments on why campuses work, and our board collectively has been to, I think, 18 different states. That's how much we went out and really looked at what is out there and what are the various models. The self-directed, good, because there's choices, and currently my son is actually in a self-directed because when COVID hit and the provider, and I completely understood, said he can't go to the food bank anymore that he's been going to for 9 years, we said, that's not gonna work, and then you can't visit, and then we said, well, that's really not gonna work. So we rented a house and we are doing self-directed through PPL. Anyone dealing with PPL? Okay, so the groans should be louder, right? So we were fortunate because I know like this will not be forever. So though I think there's some really good models cropping up for it, I do want to say that one of the problems though with self-directed is that what's the plan for when you're gone? Because I know that when I'm gone, his current thing falls apart, but when Circle Haven is built and there's a provider that has all these pieces that I think are important to make a quality provider, I think that's a better long-term plan. I've sat on panels where we've had, half the panel said this, half of the panel said that, but that's been my experience. Next slide, please. Okay, so eligibility, not IQ, it's a functional thing. You only need to in 3 of these areas, and as I said, we've had people with, very high IQs, even, advanced degrees, but still particularly would have issues with, capacity to live, to live independently. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so NJCAT, you guys seem like parents of younger kids, so probably haven't done it yet. So let me say with NJCAT, I don't care if you come to me, but go to someone, okay? Do not do the NJCAT alone. Do not do the NJCAT cold, okay? Remember I said 18,000 up to almost $500,000? That's what's at stake here. That's how the gap, that giant scale that we have here. So every question is important. Every question is a point. Every point moves you up. So we have A through F, by the way. Does anyone know that? There's actually an F tier. Very few people have it. When they put the charts up, they only put E, but there actually is an F tier. So A being the least amount of needs, smallest budget, and then as you go, the budget goes up. There's also an acuity rating. So some people say, my child has a D versus a DA. That A is the supercharger. If it was a video game, it gives you more than extra points, right? Because the rates for everything go up dramatically if someone has acuity. How do you get acuity? It's based on the person. That's not based on the family circumstance. It's looking at the person. So significant medical needs, significant behavioral needs, and then obviously there's all sorts of sections on communication and self-help. They have never released the scoring system, and though we tried with other advocacy organizations, but I've done enough of them now that we sort of know this is the hot section. But that is really, makes a big difference in budget. I think the thing to really remember is that independently really means you left your house and went to watch Real Housewives, and when you came back, your loved one was standing there dressed and had made you breakfast, okay, right? I cannot tell you how many parents that have done it and then come to us, and then we get you can, by the way, at any point in time request the actual questions and answers that you got, because it's done in a variety of different ways, and it depends on who your case manager is. I must say DDD has made a lot of improvements. I find most of the people in that unit are very caring and compassionate, but you do have to advocate, right? So independent really means that no prompts at all, and that includes reminders. So you have to tell someone, and I also found, particularly in the autism community, where the starting point for showering was that you had to physically fight to get the person in, and when you were done, you were all covered with shampoo, and the walls were all covered with water, but now the person actually goes in themselves, and you don't have that anymore. Maybe they're following a picture schedule or something like that, and the parent rate's independent, and I asked them, who turns the water on? Well, I do. Well, why do you do that? Well, because it'll make it too hot, or it'll make it too cold. Well, that's not independent. Okay? So anyway, in fact, I tell parents too that like leading up to the NJ Cat, maybe for a week, just write down every single thing. Just have a pad in the kitchen, write down everything that you do. Everything. You don't even realize it. Do you realize that you stick the straw in that juice box for them? But you're like, oh, they can totally drink independently, right? Or they can eat independently. Well, what about a food stuffer, right? Or someone that is biting such big bites that you are actually there, always in the kitchen. And if someone else is caring for them, you're going to want to say to them, when he's eating, and I'm sorry I'm saying hey, I know there's some females that are here, but it's, not statistically, but I guess it's convenient for me to say that, but he or she, right, your loved one, that you're not gonna go down the hall and, get on your computer because they'll have stuffed until maybe they choked or eaten more than they should have. So even though someone can physically do it, if it requires supervision, then you're gonna check a verbal prompt. And in some cases, maybe even hand over hand, right? That, well, he can use a fork. Do you ever, well, sometimes if the piece is small, I will hold his hand and help him stay. Well, there you have, that's lots of assistance, which is a physical prompt. So it's really, really important. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I had talked about this. So the CCP, so again, right, Giant Comprehensive Care Waiver, supports program budget. If you're eligible for DD, you're getting that. Think about that as a day program budget, but you don't have to go to the day program. You can do all sorts of things in the community with, even with family members being paid support people. But for the most part, that's smaller budget. CCP adds on the larger budget, which if you so choose, would pay a licensed provider for a residential, which could be not just a group home, it could be in a unlicensed setting where support people come in, or it could even be in a supervised apartment, but that's gonna give you that bigger budget for particularly when someone needs 24/7 care. So again, you must be enrolled in Medicaid in order to be in DDDL, but obviously for the CCP, so we always wanna protect our eligibility, which I'm gonna get to in a minute. If any time that somebody loses their Medicaid, you do have a risk of losing it. Those cases are a nightmare to unwind. DD has gotten much better about that and helping us, but we just wanna avoid it altogether. And as I said, I wanna look at it entering, so a lot of people are just thinking like, well, when I'm older, or I'll get on the wait list, right? But if you really do have a really intense situation from a variety of factors, then we may wanna look at that. You're not always gonna get it. I tell people, believe me, I have clients come in, parents will come in, and I have to tell them, you don't meet criteria. And you know what, our word and reputation is important to us. DDD knows that when we come and say, this person should get it, not that we don't have sometimes someone's on the line and we gotta advocate for a little bit, but if someone clearly can't get it, we will tell them. Next slide. Okay, so generally, most people get in the CCP, right, that larger budget that could pay for residential, when they reach you on the wait list. How do you get on the wait list? That is when the second parent turns 55, okay? Now, priority versus general waiting list, okay? Now they call it, the name's changed, now it's the CCP wait list, okay? But they still have this general wait list. So what is that general wait list? It's the equivalent of putting your loved one's name on a Post-it and hanging it up at McDonald's, okay? It is utterly meaningless. It will never be reached. They're just gathering information on who might be eventually interested. So please don't go on the general waiting list, okay? Just don't bother. You want to get on the no longer, they still call it urgent priority, but it's CCP is really what it is. When the second parent turns 55, you get placed on it, and then every summer you'll get a letter that will tell you what number you are. It's about 8 to 10 years. The wait list, some years it moves quicker than others because there'll be an initiative, so more people will come off. But that is how most people do get it. Now, another good thing too is that when they reach you on the list, yes?
Sorry, and I know this is probably like super personal, so if you wanna answer like later, I get it, but we're in this weird situation where my father, so is my brother, my father is deceased, this is my mother, she's over 55, but we're stuck on this general list.
Okay, so, you can, first of all, support coordinators should be telling parents that, and they don't always, so if there's any support coordinators in here, go back and tell everyone in your agency, make sure you're telling people, second parent turns 55, get on the wait list. If that has not happened, so you're not getting your letter, then you can certainly not only be asked to put on, but in some circumstances, you can advocate to retro to the 55th birthday. Now, they wanna know why, like, why did this happen, and, you know, I have had successful cases where no one ever told them, okay, they were not aware that they could be, and they're 67 now, okay? And if they'd been on a 55, they would not be number such and such, they'd probably be number 300. So that's one avenue, but there's this another avenue too. That's this one. So I said most people get on this way, right, wait list, but you can also jump the list. So in what circumstances do you jump the list? So that's why you're probably wondering, well, how is she getting people that are just entering it, finishing their educational entitlement and getting the CCP? The parents are probably not that old yet and they're just getting on the list, right? Well, because we have this. So the language in the reg and the statute is actually that you're at risk for imminent harm or homelessness. Homelessness, second parent passes. The sibling calls. My brother has Down syndrome, what do? We gotta go, he's now homeless. Doesn't mean that he can't come and stay in your house, but our position with the state is this is not his plan for the rest of life. Some people it might be, but generally not, right? A lot of us say we want the siblings to care about their siblings, but not have to care for their siblings, right? And I understand some families feel differently than that, not that they do feel that that needs to be their plan. In my situation, my son Andrew's younger brother is a lovely, lovely, wonderful kid, and he is now a sports broadcaster in Las Vegas. So, good thing we realized that that was not the plan, that he can care about his brother, but he does not have to care for his brother. Okay, so imminent harm. Well, so this is a combination of things, right? Frequently, it's intensive behaviors, right? People are getting hurt. The individual is getting hurt. There's holes in the wall. The parent is getting hurt. You can also have imminent harm too because of the parent's circumstance. I've had single parents that now have health issues as their own. That's also something that I'll often get all the situation, go back to the support coordinator and say, hey, this person's an EA, okay? And mom is really depressed and actually going to a counselor and, you know, no kidding, right? But that, you know, why are they not only not on the wait list, why are we looking at maybe jumping, right? Because if there's a situation where the person can no longer care, same thing with, you know, someone with medical conditions that just becomes so overwhelming that the parent just can't do it any longer. You know, all sorts of situations. One parent has cancer, they have multiple individuals with disabilities, and another one of them's needs went up. So we do have to look at it, and but if you were just an A, right? So little tiny tier, but you had a situation where you didn't have anywhere to live any longer, you can jump the list too. It's not only that imminent danger, that's sort of two different categories. So that is something that we want to look at. And you know, it is something that you want to evaluate. Sometimes the starting point is to redo your NJCAT. So start with asking your support coordinator to get you the printout. It'll actually show you the questions and the answers that you got. I will tell you, I've had cases where parents have read that and said, that is not true. Sometimes it's just not true anymore, so let's redo it. Some cases it was not true back then, but they sort of got cajoled and, oh yeah, he can physically do it, right? He could do the laundry. Yeah, well meanwhile, it's a picture schedule and he hasn't done it in 12 years, right? Unless you're standing right over them. So just, you know, they really have gotten better at that, but we do have some situations where families just didn't give all the facts. I frequently see too, where the parent will say, I didn't want to share everything because I was afraid that no one would be willing to serve him. Providers are more likely to pass on an individual because of an insufficient budget than because of intensive needs, right? So that's the worst scenario where you're just on the cusp for, and sometimes literally 2 more yeses on that NJCAT, you have the acuity, or you went up a level. So start by that. Redo your NJCAT, and then look at this issue about why are we not on the wait list.
Sorry, one more personal question.
Sorry.
So he is an EA.
On a supports budget.
Okay, honest, right, so to me, that's like, EA, boy, that sounds like someone with intent. Not every EA,
But
but,
would you recommend redoing an NJCAT?
yeah, no, don't. Okay,
Don't.
thank you. Good point. Don't wanna reduce it, absolutely. If you have an EA, now, unless there was some extreme circumstance where you possibly get an F, but that's generally where there's a provider involved, and the provider is saying, this person's an EA, they're now in the hospital, and we already tried 2-on-1, and 2-on-1 is failing, so we're gonna have to go to 3-on-1 and a behavior analyst, and we can't take them unless you give us the F. That's usually where you see it. It's usually it's very rare, but I do want to tell you it exists. So thank you. That is a very good point. That a redo. That's why I say get it and look at them. And if something changes in the other direction, then it could hurt you for sure. Okay, so HCBS, licensed versus unlicensed. So again, more alphabet soup, but I'm going to throw it at you anyway, because you seem like a very smart group and you don't care that I'm throwing you other things, right? Home community-based services. This is, she did mention in the intro about some of the work I've done, nationally and New Jersey-wise. God, how many years ago is it now? Probably 10 years ago, everything went bonkers, okay? Suddenly there were not just say state officials, but also in some cases even self-advocates, which if you know I'm a founder of National Council of Severe Autism, you know that one of the things I'm advocating for is separate distinctions here, because someone that has a 140 IQ that has a Harvard Law degree is very different than my son that has no language at all, right? So what happened then was, I don't know how many of you were in the fight, you've got younger kids, so thankfully we did the work, so you guys will be good, but it went bonkers, where suddenly, inclusion, no matter what. Oh, approved private schools are terrible, everyone should eat in the high school cafeteria, no more approved private schools. No campuses, no farmsteads, no clusters, no any United Way projects. I worked with United Way from the very first project, we just got stalled. Literally, it was like we were in the midst of a project. I think that one was Tenafly, and there was suddenly no more than 25%. We'd already picked the 10 people that were going to live there, and they said you can have 25%. And I said, which person should I cut in half? And also, who's going to come and tell the other 7.5 people that they can't move in? It took us a while to work through and advocate. In the state's defense, the feds were all over the place, and they were really giving a lot of conflicting guidance. The way it works is that, so it actually grew out of the Affordable Care Act, where the feds said, let's look at what we're spending our money on. We want to make sure that this is supposed to be non-institutional. Institution is a nursing home or a developmental center. So we want to make sure that these really are. And then I really do think that inclusion zealots sort of grabbed the conversation and said, everyone should just live in a regular apartment. I mean, I heard some crazy things on the federal level. I heard that staff is a violation of privacy. It's also life or death in some people's situation. I've heard volunteer work is a form of slavery. So there's some crazy arguments that are advocating for a very tiny little percentage of our population, and not that those individuals don't have their needs as well, and we, of course we should advocate for everyone, but certainly you can't, one size does not fit all. That's what we scream at the top of our lungs. We not only eventually got New Jersey to come along, we got the feds to change it and actually issue a letter that said, nothing bars the use of your CCP, your HCB funds in a farmstead, a cluster, a campus community, a gated community, an intentional community. It's not per se barred. Now you do have to show that people have access to the community, right? So it can't be like, if you come here, you have to work on our farm. You can't ever leave, and you can't work at McDonald's. It can't be that, or you can only use us for OT. So you have to offer access to the community and options, but in New Jersey, where we were from when we started in that first United Way project to where we are now, it's amazing. There's so many projects in the pipeline. I really do feel that in like 5 years, there's gonna be a change. In 10 years, our landscape is gonna look different. There is a lot of money out there for building. Our Circle Haven project's actually with a developer project, and you guys are up north, so I urge you to take a look at Bergen County United Way. They say Bergen, but they're all over the place. And they're doing really fabulous things in terms of stuff that they're building. Okay.
Lisa, I just want to give you a time check. It's,
Okay, time check. Do I even have
quarter.
another slide? Let's see.
Oh,
Oh, boy, I gotta talk quick. Okay, I'll stay a little late for Q&A. Okay, so as I said, Medicaid's really important. Gotta have the number, otherwise you can't even apply. Next one. Okay, so I'm gonna send you to the ARC because there's a lot of different programs within Medicaid. The majority of people are gonna go into SSI because they're gonna have a lifelong disability, not an extensive work history, and they're gonna get that monthly check of about $600 a month and get the Medicaid. That's the most of us probably sitting here, most of the individuals you serve. Some people might have a work history, so there are other programs like workability. This has been my experience though. It's almost like, here's the gatekeeper. So I have this a lot of times when people will say like, well, I sort of can work but can't work, and it's like when we're applying, an extensive work history hurts us, but I hate to ever tell someone if they find it fulfilling and they want to do it. But the irony is once you get into it, this workability thing, which you don't get a monthly check, but you get on Medicaid, so you get a DDD budget. I don't even know what the current numbers are now. It's amazing. You can have a house, you can have a car to get yourself to work. You can make like 50 grand a year. So, but the best resource for that is ARC of New Jersey, not only for that person to call, but their website is amazing and they constantly have webinars. Whenever they do it, they post it on. So if you have someone that is capable of working even in the future and you want to know more about that, they have one on that. Okay, now asset limits. I think this is the last topic, so I think special needs trust. Okay, so in the beginning, told you we all need, everybody needs it, right? Think about it. If you are in a coma, are you going to say, and I swear I remember a lawyer asked me this, and I remember my mother-in-law's answer was, do you want me to come to you every day and read to you, or do you want me to put a pillow over your head? Okay. My answer was put a pillow over my head. My mother-in-law was, I want you to read to me every day, 24 hours a day. Okay. So those are things, they're scary things to think about, but everyone should be having these kind of discussions so you know what end-of-life choices would be. So that's for people that don't have a disabled. For a disabled person, we've got to protect that Medicaid, and anything over $2,000, $2,001 bumps you off Medicaid. So parents have done no estate planning. They say, we don't have anything. And then you say, yes, but you did have a house. All right, you don't have a house. Well, you had a car. How about this? Someone had a life insurance policy. If you have a life insurance policy, it needs to be left to the trust, not to the individual. If you leave it to the individual, it counts. Doesn't mean it can't be unwound. We can unwind it, but it's better to prevent it. Next slide, please. Okay, so there's different kinds of trust. Just a thing that if you do it properly and you've set up a, usually a third party, they call them special needs trust, you can tell other people, like grandma and grandpa, if you're gonna leave Johnny something, please leave it to the trust instead. And also, this one is a really bad option. Parents will say, I really trust my daughter, I don't need to do that, she'll just split everything, she'll make sure her brother's taken care of, right? Okay, you're putting the daughter in a terrible circumstance, because after you're gone, what if the daughter has their own disabled person, and now they're sitting there on whatever, let's say, the pile of money. I gotta spend on my brother, I gotta get my kid braces, or leg braces, or surgery, or something like that. Or they get divorced. There's a lot of scenarios where you don't, and it's a terrible burden. You think you're doing something kind to the non-disabled sibling, but you're really putting them in a very bad situation. So don't do that. Next slide, please. This might be the last one. Last thing is that there is, New Jersey now has this, which is great. It was a federal law. It took New Jersey a little time to do, but we have it. So this is where you can put money in a savings account and have up to $100,000 if it's put in an actual ABLE account, which is something you can go to the bank to and get. You can put up to $18,000 a year, and $100,000 is not exempt, okay? And then I think there's one last slide. Yes, so I'm not even gonna do all this other than tell you first party, third party, ABLE. Okay, first party, that just means that in some circumstances, the disabled person has funds, okay? So someone screwed up, or maybe there was a personal injury suit, and there's money in their name, right? So, but we wanna put it in trust because we wanna get into Medicaid. You can, with court approval, go in and create a first-party trust. And then what they mean by that is that that's a disabled person's money, let's put it in the trust. What is the downside of that? If it happens, we do it, because let's take care of it. It's a payback. So at the death of that person, if there's money left in that trust, rather than it going to the other grandchildren, it goes back to the state. So a better way to do it is to not let that happen and do a third-party trust, which means the money's coming from somewhere else, meaning, so I'm the disabled person, it's not my money, it's not first party, it's coming from somewhere else. Where's it coming from? Grandma, mom, dad, right? It's their money, is going into a trust. So it's a third party that's funding the trust, okay? So that's the preferable route, and that is not be paid at the death of the person, and you can do whatever you want to. I've seen people that have even left it for not-for-profits or other things, or, you know, if there's other siblings and grandchildren. Okay, I think that was it. Yeah, now I'm gonna take a sip of water. And then we're gonna open, and can we shut the recording off, because if people ask questions, I like them, so how do we pause it?